I didn't expect a name like hers to pop up on the screen. Not during my lunch break. Not after all these years. Not like that. But there she was, Vanessa Calder, CFO of a Fortune 500 company, featured on the front page of a business magazine. From teenage mom to tech titan, I damn near dropped my sandwich. And beside her, a boy, 15, maybe 16. Tall, dark-haired, a sharp jawline and those eyes. I'd seen those eyes before, in someone else, someone long gone. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't start stalking her LinkedIn after that, but something about that smile, that quiet steel behind her expression, it dragged me back to a version of her I hadn't thought about in over a decade. Back then, she was 20, broke, terrified, and pregnant. Her parents were the kind you picture in starched collars and judgmental glares. Bible verses on the fridge, rules carved in stone. When she told them about the pregnancy, they didn't cry. They didn't pray. They locked the door behind her. No car, no savings, no plan. Just her, a duffel bag, and a child on the way. She could have gone anywhere. Could have made 1,000 different choices. But she chose to keep the baby. She said, "He'll be the last piece of him I have left. Him. That man, the one dying of lymphoma at 24. The guy who met her at a music festival, loved her like the sun, and left the world before his child took its first breath. 15 years later, they act like they care. They want back in. And me? I got the front row seat to this circus. Because I married her. I'll be honest, when I met Vanessa, I didn't get the full story. Not at first. She told me she had a son, sure. Said his father passed away when they were young. That it was complicated. I didn't press. I figured we all carry ghosts, and some of them like to stay in their corners. What she didn't tell me, at least not until much later, was that her parents tried to buy her silence after the baby was born. Just don't tell anyone we're related. We'll wire you something monthly, quietly, classy, right? She told them to keep their money. Said if she was going to raise her son alone, she'd do it on her own terms. I didn't know whether to admire her or pity her. Maybe both. By the time we got married, she had clawed her way into the business world like it owed her rent. Working nights, finishing her degree with a baby on her hip, while I was still figuring out how taxes worked. And her son, Julian, smart kid, too quiet, carried himself like a little old man in a teenager's body. Didn't talk much about his real dad. But when he looked in the mirror, you could tell. He knew exactly who he came from. Vanessa never hid the past, but she never unpacked it either. It was like a box taped shut in the attic, collecting dust but never forgotten. Then came the magazine feature, the one that triggered the miracle. Her parents, the same people who threw her out in the cold, suddenly remembered they had a daughter and a grandson. Funny how success resurrects relationships. The first message came from her mother. "Sweetheart, we're so proud of you. Let's reconnect." I watched Vanessa read it twice. Her face didn't move. Her fingers, though, clenched just a little too tight around the phone. "They don't get to come back," she said. But I could already see it in her eyes. Something had cracked open. A week later, her father showed up. Not a call. Not an email. Not even a text to test the waters. Just rang the doorbell at 11:15 on a Sunday like it was a casual neighborly visit. I was the one who answered. He looked older than the picture in Vanessa's drawer. Same steely blue eyes, but time had worn them down. His suit was too polished for someone just stopping by. His smile, practiced. "I'm here to see my daughter," he said. Like that word hadn't been a stranger in his mouth for 15 years. Vanessa didn't slam the door in his face. She made tea, the kind of grace I'll never understand. They sat across from each other in the living room. She didn't ask him why he came. He didn't ask her to forgive him. They just danced around it, like two diplomats pretending there wasn't a war behind them. He complimented the house, said she must have worked hard. She just nodded like he was commenting on the weather. And then came the kicker. "We were wrong back then," he said gently. "But you have to understand. We were scared. It wasn't personal." Vanessa didn't laugh, but I did. Couldn't help it. You kicked her out with nothing but a coat and a 6-month belly. But sure, not personal. He looked at me like I wasn't supposed to speak. Like I was just the furniture. Vanessa reached for my hand. Her grip was firm, unshaking. Then her father said the words we'd been waiting for. The real reason he came. We'd love to meet Julian. He deserves to know his grandparents. I looked at her. She looked at me. And then she smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't touch your eyes. Sure, she said. Let's plan something. And just like that, the hook was set. She never told me her plan. But I knew that smile wasn't forgiveness. It was a fuse. She didn't tell Julian right away. She let the idea sit. Marinate. Like she was waiting for the right temperature to flip the pan. A few days later, over dinner, she dropped it like it was just another Tuesday topic. Julian, your grandparents reached out. They'd like to meet you. He froze mid-bite. Not scared. Not excited. Just alert. My dad's parents? He asked. No, she said gently. Mine. Julian blinked. I thought you didn't talk to them. I don't, she said. But now they want to. He looked at her, then at me. Then back at his plate. Do I have to? That hit me harder than I expected. The kid was 15, had never met the people who shared his blood, and his first instinct was resistance. That tells you everything you need to know about the shadow they left behind. Vanessa didn't push. It's your call, she said. But I think it might be worth it. Just once. I could tell she hated saying that. Every word probably scraped against her throat. But this wasn't about reunion. It was about revelation. So a meeting was set. A casual lunch at a restaurant downtown. Neutral ground, public setting. No one could storm out and no one could throw plates unless they wanted a Yelp review. Julian asked if I'd come. Vanessa said no, she wanted it to be just them. But before they left, she turned to me and said, do you remember that picture I showed you? Of him holding Julian's ultrasound? I nodded. Make sure it's on the fridge when we get back. That's when I realized something. This wasn't a lunch. It was a reckoning. And her son? He was the mirror they tried to break. Now they were going to have to stare into it. She wore white. Not because it was flattering, Vanessa didn't care about that, but because it made her look untouchable. Clean. Unbothered. Like someone who didn't need to be forgiven because she never did anything wrong in the first place. Julian wore a navy button-down. He looked older in it. Straighter posture. Chin up. He didn't smile when we took the photo before they left. He just asked, why now? Vanessa tucked a hand behind his neck. Because they missed 15 birthdays, she said. Let's see how they act when they realize what that cost. And then they left. I didn't go like she asked. But I was at the table anyway in her earpiece, listening through the phone she kept in her jacket pocket. Not to spy. She wanted a witness. Someone who knew what really went down unfiltered. The call connected just as the waiter brought water. Julian, her mother cooed, you've grown so handsome. He thanked her. Politely. Like he was greeting strangers at a funeral. Her dad asked about school. Sports. Friends. Every word felt like it was picked off a checklist for how to bond with a kid you abandoned. Then came the inevitable. We want to make up for lost time, her mother said. We've changed. We see things differently now. That's when Vanessa leaned forward. Do you remember what you said when I told you I was pregnant? She asked, her voice cool. Silence. She didn't wait for an answer. You said I was dead to you. You said you hoped the child would be born without your name so no one would ever know he belonged to your line. Her mother blinked hard. Her father shifted in his seat. Julian sat still. Vanessa turned to him and said, they didn't reject me, Julian. They rejected you before you were even here. He looked at them. One. Then the other. Then back to Vanessa. And calmly, like he was discussing tomorrow's homework, he said, yeah, I don't need them. Her father swallowed hard. And for the first time since that man walked back into our lives, he looked afraid. They say time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time doesn't heal, it hides. Covers things with dust until someone comes along, wipes the surface, and you're face to face with everything you thought was buried. That's what happened when her father saw Julian up close. The boy wasn't just her son, he was his son. Not biologically, of course. But in every line of his face, every tilt of his chin, every pause before he spoke, Julian was the ghost of the man they tried to erase. The man who loved Vanessa when loving her cost everything. The one they called a mistake. A disgrace. A phase. Julian didn't know the full story then. Not yet. But he could feel it. You could see it in the way he watched them squirm, the way he picked apart every word they said without saying much himself. When they left the restaurant, her father offered a handshake. Vanessa ignored it. Julian didn't even look at his hand. In the car ride home, she told him everything. How she met his father. How they fell in love fast and loud like they knew the clock was ticking. How the diagnosis came in like a wrecking ball and still he stayed with her through every test, every treatment, every night he couldn't sleep from the pain. And how her parents found out she was pregnant and treated it like a death sentence, not for him but for them. Their reputation. Their spotless church pew image. Julian sat in silence. No tears. No trembling lip. Just quiet processing. He knew he wouldn't make it, Vanessa said. But he told me if our kid could make the world just 1 ounce better, it'd all be worth it. Julian nodded once. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Do we have a picture of him? Vanessa smiled. He's on the fridge. When they got home, the house was quiet. Julian walked into the kitchen first. I was leaning against the counter, pretending not to listen, even though I hadn't moved from that spot since they left. He didn't say a word, just looked straight at the fridge. And there it was. That old photo. A young man in a hospital gown, pale but grinning, holding up an ultrasound like it was a trophy. Eyes full of pain and pride. Julian stared at it for a long time. I mean, really looked. He didn't reach for it. Didn't ask anything. Then he nodded to himself. Yeah, that's him. It wasn't a question. Vanessa stood behind him, her hands tucked into her sleeves. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. She'd braced herself for this moment for 15 years, and now that it was here, she said nothing. Julian finally turned to her. You said they hated him, right? She nodded. They never saw him. Not really. Just what he represented. And what was that, he asked. Her voice was steady. Cold. Freedom. Love. Defiance. Everything they couldn't control. That hit him harder than he let on. He just took a deep breath and looked at the photo again. I want to keep this in my room. Vanessa hesitated, then carefully took the magnet off and handed it to him. You deserve to know where you come from, she said. Julian walked upstairs, the picture tucked under his arm like a shield. I looked at her, expecting something, a tear, maybe. A sigh. Instead, she turned to me and said, they thought I'd come crawling back. That we needed them. Then she laughed once. Dry. Quiet. But now they've met him. And they know. Know what? I asked. That he didn't just survive without them, she said. He became everything they were afraid of. I should have known it wasn't over. People like that don't leave quietly. Especially not when they think something still belongs to them, even if they threw it away years ago. The letter came in a thick ivory envelope like it was a wedding invite or some classy charity gala. Embossed return address, no handwriting, just a printed label with a zip code that reeked of country clubs and golf carts. Vanessa didn't open it right away. She just stared at it on the kitchen table for a full minute before sliding it over to me. Go ahead, she said. Let's see how far they're willing to humiliate themselves. Inside, a 5-paragraph apology wrapped in legalese and holy guilt. Her mother called their past actions a moment of spiritual confusion. Her father called it a lapse in leadership as head of the family. They wanted a meeting. A real one. At the house. Said they had something important to discuss, something about Julian's future and belonging. I nearly choked on my coffee. Belonging? Now they care about belonging. Vanessa didn't flinch. They saw him. That's what changed. They saw who he looks like. They saw who he is. I nodded. And now they're trying to rebrand. She gave me a look, the kind that said she wasn't buying what they were selling. But I could tell something was shifting behind her eyes. Not fear. Not hope. Readiness. They think he's their legacy now, she said. But they forgot something. What? I built him without them. Every part of him. Every scar, every strength. She picked up the letter, lit a match, and dropped it in the sink. We watched it burn to nothing. No drama. No declaration. Just a quiet refusal. And when it was ash, she looked at me and said, set up the chairs. If they want a final act, we'll give them one. They came dressed like they were heading to Sunday service. Pressed slacks, neutral smiles, the kind of uncomfortable calm that only comes from rehearsing your lines in the car. Julian stood at the top of the stairs, watching them from the landing like a soldier surveying the battlefield. I saw it in his eyes, no fear. Just calculation. He wasn't a child to them anymore. And they knew it. We didn't offer them drinks. Vanessa led them to the living room, motioned for them to sit. She remained standing. We're not here to reconnect, she said plainly. So if you're hoping for some teary reunion, you should have stayed in the car. Her mother flinched at the tone. Her father, to his credit, tried to lead. We understand this is difficult, but it's important we speak openly. Vanessa crossed her arms. Openly? Now you want honesty? You taught me how to lie with a smile before I could spell my own name. He cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. Julian is a remarkable young man. He deserves a proper place in the family. There are opportunities we could provide, eh? There it is, I muttered. The sales pitch. But Vanessa didn't interrupt. She let them keep talking. Inheritance. Family legacy. Guidance. All the things they never once offered when it mattered. All tied up with a bow-labeled redemption. Then her mother leaned in, all soft-voiced and saintly. He looks so much like his father, she said. It's uncanny. That's when Julian came down the stairs. Slow. Calm. Like he'd timed his entrance for dramatic effect, because he had. He walked past his grandparents, didn't even glance at them. Went straight to the photo of his father on the shelf, picked it up and held it out like evidence in court. This man, he said, stood by my mom when you didn't. He didn't have money. He didn't have power. But he had a spine. Silence. Then he set the photo on the coffee table, looked both of them dead in the eye, and said, I already have a family. Vanessa smiled, small, satisfied. Not smug. Just done. Her father looked pale. Her mother looked like she'd swallowed glass. They didn't say goodbye when they left. Good. They weren't welcome back anyway. After they left, the house was still. No fireworks. No yelling. Just a quiet that settled over everything, like the air itself had been waiting for closure. Julian sat on the couch, staring at the photo for a few minutes. Then he looked at me. They were never going to apologize, were they? I shook my head. They don't believe they did anything wrong. They just don't like how it looks now. He nodded. No emotion. Just understanding, the kind that hardens a person in the right ways. Vanessa didn't say much that night. She poured herself a glass of wine, curled up on the back porch, and stared at the stars like she was finally alone with her own mind. I didn't interrupt. That woman had carried 15 years of silence. She deserved a little space to set it down. Later, when I joined her, she said something I won't forget. I spent so long waiting for them to say we were wrong, thinking it would fix something. She glanced over. But it wouldn't have, would it? I shook my head. Some debts can't be paid in words. She exhaled slowly. I didn't keep Julian to prove a point. I kept him because I knew he was worth it. Even when I was scared. Even when I was alone. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't seem like she was fighting anymore. She seemed free. They saw what they lost, I said. Yeah, she whispered. And now they have to live with it. Inside, Julian taped the photo to his bedroom wall, right next to his acceptance letter from a pre-college science program. His future was unfolding, no thanks to them. And the man they tried to erase? He'd live on. In Julian's face. In his voice. In every brilliant, stubborn move he made from here on out. Their legacy? Irrelevant. Ours? Just getting started. A week passed. Then another. No more calls. No more doorstep surprises. Just silence, the kind that only shows up when people realize they've lost. We thought that was the end of it. Until the envelope arrived. Smaller this time. No gold-embossed address, no legal-sized theatrics. Just a plain white envelope with Vanessa's name in tight, sharp handwriting. From her father. She didn't open it right away. Just held it like it might explode. Julian watched from the hallway, arms crossed. Do you want me to read it first? I asked. She shook her head. No. If it's the last thing they ever say, I want to hear it directly. She opened it slowly, slid the single sheet out like it might bleed. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea. It was a transaction. They offered a trust fund. For Julian. A significant amount. If he chooses to carry our family name forward, it said, this is our gift to help him do so with pride. Vanessa didn't speak. Julian stepped forward, took the letter, read it once, then again. Then he smiled, not with joy, but with something sharper. They think I'm for sale. Vanessa took the letter back, folded it carefully, and walked to the fireplace. No drama. No flames licking the ceiling. Just a quiet flick of a match and a slip of paper turning to ash. Pride, she said. They wouldn't recognize real pride if it shook their hand and looked them in the eye. Julian nodded, then walked back upstairs like he'd just taken a test and passed. Later that night, Vanessa sat beside me and said, I used to think I'd feel better if they saw what they missed out on. That it would hurt them. And now? I asked. She looked at me with clear, steady eyes. Now I just want them to disappear. Not out of hatred. Out of peace. And that finally felt real. A few mornings later, Julian walked into the kitchen with a form in his hand and a nervous look on his face. Can you sign this? He asked Vanessa. She glanced at it. Parental consent for a scholarship essay submission. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then she looked closer and her breath caught. Under full name, he hadn't written Julian Calder. He'd written Julian Mercer. His father's last name. Vanessa didn't speak for a moment. She just stared at the paper like it was a message from the past, and in a way, it was. Are you sure? She asked. He nodded. I know what Calder means, he said. But Mercer, that feels like mine. Like the parts of me that don't have conditions. I expected her to tear up. But Vanessa didn't cry. She smiled. A quiet, steady, almost defiant smile. Your father would have been proud, she said, signing the form with a firm hand. Hell, I'm proud. Julian took the paper back and gave her a quick, awkward hug, the kind only a teenage boy can pull off without turning red. And that was it. A name on a page. But more than that, a line in the sand. A claim. That evening, he pinned his acceptance letter next to the photo again, but this time with a note underneath in bold black ink. Julian Mercer, engineer, son, enough. Vanessa stood beside me in the doorway, arms crossed, not saying much. You okay? I asked. She nodded. He just rewrote the story. With his own name. And as the sun dipped behind the house, casting golden light across the floor, we both knew something had shifted. Julian wasn't just stepping into a future. He was leaving something behind on his own terms. It happened at the science fair. Of all places. Julian had just finished presenting his project, something with sensors, data tracking, and a title that went over my head but made the judge's eyebrows rise. He was calm, focused, and 10 steps ahead of every question they threw at him. Vanessa and I stood off to the side, giving him space. Watching. That's when I noticed her. A woman, late 50s, standing near the exit in a beige coat. Her hair pulled back too tightly. Her hands clutched around a leather purse like it was the last thing keeping her grounded. Vanessa spotted her a second later. Her shoulders stiffened, lips pressed into a line. Is that? Yeah, she said. Her mother didn't approach the display. Didn't speak. Just watched. Watched her grandson speak with confidence. Watched him stand tall next to his project. Watched him light up when the judge nodded in approval. And then, before he could see her, she turned and slipped out the door. No drama. No scene. Just gone. Vanessa exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 15 years. She came to look, I said. Vanessa nodded. But not to be seen. She's not ready. She never will be. Julian walked up seconds later, grinning. They said I'm a finalist. Regionals next month. We both smiled. Nice work, Mercer, I said, and he beamed. He never knew she'd been there. We didn't tell him. Not because we were protecting her, but because it didn't matter. Julian wasn't looking for ghosts anymore. And his future? It was packed, planned, and brightly lit. The past could watch from the crowd, but it wasn't allowed on stage. A few weeks later, Vanessa asked me to drive. No explanation. Just handed me the keys one morning, eyes distant but calm. Where to? I asked. She gave me a street name I hadn't heard before. But the moment we pulled up, I understood. It was the house she grew up in. White siding, pale blue shutters, and a porch swing that hadn't moved in a decade. The curtains were drawn. The yard trimmed. Too neat for a place that once pushed out its own blood. She didn't get out of the car. Just sat there, hands on her lap, staring through the windshield like it was a window into a life that never happened. I used to think, she said quietly, that if I ever came back here, it'd be with success pouring out of my pockets. A parade. A point to prove. She smiled small and sharp. But now I realize this place has nothing I want. I didn't speak. Just waited. Do you know what I remember most about this porch? She asked. I shook my head. Being 17. Sitting on that swing after curfew, stomach sick with worry, trying to figure out how to tell them I was pregnant. And when I finally did, they didn't ask who the father was. Didn't ask how I felt. Just asked if anyone knew yet. She turned to me, eyes clear. That's when I knew they weren't my family. Just people I shared walls with. The wind picked up. A soft creak from the porch. I'm not angry anymore, she said. I thought I'd burn the place down with my eyes. But I just feel nothing. And that was bigger than revenge. She rolled down the window, took a small folded note from her bag, and tossed it onto the front step. It read, "He turned out just fine. No thanks to you." Then she told me to drive. She didn't look back. Not once. That house? It stayed behind right where it belonged. Graduation day came with sunshine and the kind of breeze that makes you think life's been holding its breath just for this. Julian stood in his cap and gown, tassel dangling, scanning the crowd like he wasn't sure it was all real. Valedictorian. Full scholarship. First choice program. The kid had earned every inch of that stage, not with shortcuts or handouts, but with late nights, grit, and the quiet kind of brilliance that doesn't ask for attention but always gets it. Vanessa gripped my hand as his name echoed through the speakers. Julian Mercer. Not Calder. Not some hollow echo of people who tried to shape him into silence. Mercer. The name of a man who didn't live long but loved fiercely. The name of a boy who rose from rejection into something they never expected. He took the stage, smiled, accepted his diploma, and somewhere, I swear, Vanessa exhaled 15 years of weight in one quiet breath. Later, at the small backyard celebration, I caught Julian standing by the photo again, the same one he'd carried from fridge to room to frame. His father, holding that ultrasound like it meant everything. Julian looked older now, taller, still had those same eyes. Think he'd be proud? He asked. Vanessa didn't hesitate. He'd be speechless. Julian nodded once. I didn't do it for them, you know. I know. I did it because I wanted to see who I'd become if they weren't holding me back. And there it was. The whole story. Not in fire. Not in fury. Just a quiet boy with his father's face and his mother's fire, standing on a life they built with nothing but willpower and truth. Vanessa didn't get revenge with lawyers or headlines. She got it with Julian. Every time he took a step forward, the people who left her behind had to watch what they lost. And Julian? He didn't even look back. Because you don't look for approval in the ashes. You build your future in spite of them.